getting sacked 23 times, 4 ahead of the next closest quarterback. Max, is Irsay wasting away this man's career?
Maybe, but that's not the point here. The point here is that once you extend the contracts of the coach and the GM, which he did this calendar year, 3-year extensions. Would I have done that? No, I wouldn't have. Do I think it's a mistake? Yes, I do. But once you do that, you plan your work, you work your plan, as they say. You don't then start to think about making changes, as Stephen A. Smith has suggested, when you were like a play away from being tied for first in the division. So you mean now the defense collapsed, there's problems with the defense, we all know that. Andrew Luck is holding this thing together with spit and bubble gum, basically. But you have a 2-score lead with under 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter on the road against the division leader. You're about to win that game, and because you lose in overtime by a single play, essentially, you're going to allow that. Now, even had they won that game, I would have still thought it was a mistake to give Pagano and Grigson the extension. Still a mistake. But just because they lost that game, you want to get rid of them? No. The lesson of sports is to be patient. Once you give them a 3-year extension, 6 games into a season where, again, 1 play away from being tied for a division lead is not the time to start rattling cages and putting people on the hot seat.
I'll give it to you, Max. You've surprised the hell out of me with this one. I'll be the first to admit it. I thought you had said asinine things before. This might take the cake. This might actually take the cake. So let me get this straight. They're in last place. They have a franchise guy you love who you said would be league MVP. Stand pat. Let's not panic. Let's work. Might. Oh, you stop it. You sound like you need to be tested. You've got to be crazy. The Indianapolis coach, before I even go any further, Slayer, just be patient with me here, my brother. Yeah. Could y'all play the sound of Max talking about Andrew Luck just about a week or 2 ago? Could you play that for me, first take?
If they win the division, considering all these things, you have T.Y. Hilton, you have some guys, and we've brought that up in the past, who can catch the ball, but that's about it, other than Andrew Luck. If they win the division, is Andrew Luck the MVP?
No.
Is he your MVP?
No.
Because he's mine.
I told you that before the beginning.
I think this year so far, even with all the shots he's taken, he's been one of the handful of best players in the league.
Wasn't exactly the sound I was looking for. Let me explain. You said they have nothing else. Mark Schlereth, help me out here. What's the job of a general manager, in this case, me and Ryan Grigson? What's his job?
His job is to procure talent for the football team.
Okay, the coach, Chuck Pagano, he's got, a couple of things. Did you know that his offensive line coach was Joe Philbin? that dude, you know, the whole Richie Incognito saga that, couldn't manage himself or his team. He's your offensive line coach. Your offensive coordinator, some dude, Rob Chudzinski, 4-12 in 2013 as the coach of the Cleveland Browns, okay? All right, I'm just 4-12. Listen, you've got him, you've got Brian Schottenheimer, who hasn't proven himself. Your defensive coordinator, Ted Monachino, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. What is his claim to fame? He's a fiery dude. He's the antithesis to Chuck Pagano. He's the yin to his yang. But it didn't look that way against Detroit. Didn't look that way against Houston. Losing games. So you got a defense that can't get it done. You got an offense that can't get it done. You got an offensive line that can't protect your franchise, dude. You got a coach that's hiring a bunch of misfits. You got a general manager that hasn't shown up to work, as far as I'm concerned, in 4 damn years. And on top of all of that, you're saying, let's work the plan. What plan? I won't even ask. It's a rhetorical question because I'm done listening to you, Max. Mark Schlereth, take it over.
Well,
you got to be kidding.
I'm not 100% sure what plan. I think
there is no plan.
I look at the Indianapolis Colts, and it's been this way since the Peyton Manning days. I've always thought they were an 8-8 talent team that went 12-4 every year because Peyton Manning made up for a multitude of sins. That's who that guy is. Now you've got Andrew Luck, who I think still is one of the best players in the National Football League, a great quarterback, but you haven't surrounded him with the talent you have.
And hasn't protected him.
Right. You have a guy that tends to hold the ball a lot longer than Peyton Manning held the ball. And you know, he's taken the brunt of that responsibility. He's put it on his shoulders. But the bottom line is you haven't either drafted well or maybe worse, you haven't developed players well enough to protect your quarterback. This guy is a guy that missed half the season last year with, I believe, a lacerated kidney.
Yes.
Last time I checked, when you have internal organs, that is bad. Internal organ injuries, that's a bad situation.
And he's been sacked 23 times and been
Mark,
hit
let me ask you a
about 30
question.
more.
Mark, let me ask you a question, because clearly all that's true, and they haven't done a good job, which is why I wouldn't have given the coach and the GM and the extensions that they got, right? Okay, but once you give them the extensions, 6 games into a season where the division is still up for grabs, you want to make changes now?
Well, listen, at the end of the season, I think it's completely fair for their owner to evaluate the decision he made, and is it the right decision? Because we go all the way back, they were having offensive success. Who was the offensive coordinator that took over as the interim coach for the Indianapolis Colts, who's doing great things in Arizona right now? Bruce Arians. They haven't produced offensively since Bruce Arians left.
And I would say this, just to clarify my position on what Max is alluding to. I understand that you can't change Pagano now, because if you get rid of him, as I think it was Doyle, or yes, Greg Doyle does an outstanding job. He works. He wrote about this. He was saying you don't get rid of Pagano because you got a whole bunch of people behind him you don't want to put in that position either. You don't want to elevate to the head coaching job on an interim basis for the rest of the season. Fair enough. What's the excuse for keeping Grigson? You send a message. You send a message. You get rid of him, and you let Pagano know your days are numbered unless this damn thing turns around.
Hold on. Are we writing the Colts season off in that division? That's anybody's division. So if the Colts go on and win the division, you're going to be singing the same tune?
No. I'm not saying that, Max. I'm saying to you they're not a very good team. They haven't been put together. I don't care if they win the division because I consider it the weakest in football, and they're not going to do anything anyway. That's what I'm saying. For the long-term health of Andrew Luck, you got to make changes. That's what I'm trying to say.
We'll leave it there. Mark, thank you so much for being with us.
It's always a pleasure.
Great to see you and have your perspective. Coming up next, Broncos linebacker Brandon Marshall said that he's happy Brock Osweiler got paid this offseason, has no ill will towards him, but didn't stop there, saying with a smile, it's Brock. We know Brock. He came from here, and we want to kill him. That's just what we want to do. Mark, you know a little something about this town, this organization.
Right.
Are you okay with those harsh words?
Well, yeah. I mean, I understand the difference between literally wanting to kill a guy and the common day vernacular of locker room talk, the NFL vernacular. So I can separate the two.
That's real locker room talk.
Right.
That's the kind of locker room talk that actually does happen.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
I understand that. I would also say this. In a day and age right now where we've got guys protesting, and I understand their right to protest, and I don't have any issue with that. And I understand that there are inequities in this country that need to be looked at. I get all those things. But there's a certain level of tone deafness here from Brandon Marshall using that particular vernacular that he needs to be careful with, because he's put himself in this position as one of the guys that's choosing to kneel down to draw attention to the inequities in this country and some of the police brutality things that have gone on that we have all witnessed. So there's a certain amount of tone deafness there that you really need to be careful with if you're Brandon Marshall, or really anybody that's playing in the National Football League in this day and age.
Go ahead, Max.
Well, I didn't understand Bountygate. I still don't understand it. It's a full contact sport where part of your strategy can be to wear down your opponent physically. You know what wearing down your opponent physically means if it's not just cardiovascularly wearing down? And it's not. It means injuring them, whether it's a small accumulation of small injuries or one big one. As long as it's a legal hit, you can injure them, take them off the field of play. That benefits your team. So I never understood Bountygate, to tell you the truth, which never really promoted illegal hits. Just, hey, legally hit them as hard as you can. In boxing, you're taught to punch through the target. Now, literally, as Mark pointed out, you don't literally mean leave a hole in the person's chest, but you're trying to. Knowing that you can't do it, you're trying to, and bad things can happen as a result, to the lasting bad things, to the health of your opponent in boxing and in the NFL and in tackle football, the size and speed of these guys and the nature of the game. So when someone says what they're trying to do, and it's not to be taken literally, although there can be literal consequences, by the way. We shouldn't just pretend there can't be. Bad things happen in tackle football to people, and that's kind of the name of the game. I don't get the outrage. Whatever you need to do to put yourself in the frame of mind to hit legally as hard as you can, that's what you got to do.
Well, here's where I disagree with you, Max. I agree with Schlereth when you say you're a bit tone deaf. He's a bit tone deaf because of who he is, what position he's taken, how people are going to look at every little thing to attack him because of how divided we are as a nation, combined with some of the things that has already happened in pro football where you got to remember, Max, if you take what you're saying into consideration, there's a whole bunch of things that shouldn't be fined for because the volatility that comes with the sport is something that should be predictable. It's relatively tolerant because you signed up for it in the eyes of some folks watching the sport. But that's not reality. Reality is that Vontaze Burfict, who just got fined $75,000 and is appealing, good luck with that. The reality is you can't do that. You can't do some of the things that he's done. You can't knock people
That's
upside
different.
the head.
He's breaking the rules. He's breaking the rules.
But let me say something to you. He may be breaking the rules, but a lot of times, a lot of things come along with football that were once tolerated. That's no longer tolerated because times have changed. Now, it changed in terms of the violence of the sport because of Roger Goodell and his mission to get the sport more safer so they don't have to worry about litigation down the pike because of guys that, CTE and other things coming their way. But in the case of Brandon Marshall, you also have to remember, Brock Osweiler left the Denver Broncos. He was nurtured and grown by John Elway. Ultimately, he left for more money in Houston. They got the 30th ranked offense. He isn't playing great, even though he just won a game Monday night. But the other side to that is that you had a lot of dudes on that Denver Broncos squad that was looking for him to stir the ship so they could try to repeat as champions. I know by talking to you, Schlereth, Denver Broncos are a very proud yet sensitive bunch. They look for anything to fuel them. You left us? Right. Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you? That's fine. The problem is so many things take place in today's game when that mentality is adopted that it heightens awareness on the parts of the overseers who are looking at anything that you do to sit there and gauge whether or not you were excessive and you crossed the line. That's something that now Brandon Marshall is going to have to deal with because the words that he put out there, exercising the tone deafness that you alluded to, has now brought unwanted attention in his direction, potentially. And now everything that happens in this game to Brock Osweiler is going to be dissected with a fine-tooth comb. And you might not have wanted to do that.
As long as it's legal.
And don't forget, this is a team that early in the season, the first Thursday night game of the season against the Carolina Panthers, who were widely criticized for stepping over the line and hitting Cam Newton in the head multiple times. Brandon Marshall, one of those guys that hit him that didn't get fined. So I think you have to look at this just from a, like I said earlier, a tone deafness standpoint, and you've got to be very careful with the words you use, especially in this society of being politically correct and with all the social activism that's going on right now. And I'm all for it, man. I am all for people voicing their opinions, causing us to look at ourselves introspectively and saying, what do we need to do as a society to change these things? I'm all for that. But you've opened up Pandora's box by using terminology that really probably doesn't have a place in our society as it sits right now.
The tone deafness point's a good one, especially in a sport where that can actually happen. It's better not to use that kind of language. My basic point, and the reason I went back to Bountygate, because when people talk tough about hurting the other side, is look, there are rules. A football player or a team should be able to think or say or do anything within those rules. As long, so
Max,
I don't understand if you're...
Hold on, Max. That's naive. And here's the reason why. Because the rules of the game themselves, to some degree, are being governed not just by the overseers who have not been on the field, meaning a Roger Goodell, but also by Joe Public and the reaction to the violence. Sometimes you're looking, wait a minute, you're looking for the motivation behind it. All Schlereth is saying is this: if you don't say it, You don't bring the extra attention.
Right.
As a result, the eye of the storm is not on you, and then you might have the freedom to do what you're talking about that you do.
Kill is a bad word choice. But had he said something like, we want to hurt him, it's a hurting game. It's a hitting game. If you can take the quarterback off the field with a legal hit, do it.
Right. It was, he said it earlier, he said crush him, and then the next sentence was kill him. And of course,
that's
the only thing we're focusing on is the kill him aspect of that. And listen, the common vernacular in an NFL locker room is things, go back to Bountygate, it is things that we have said forever, for decades.
That's right.
But we're starting to realize that, like, probably shouldn't say that in public. You know, behind closed doors, it's the way we talk. Right. But in public, it's probably not.
You don't say it in public. You don't say it in public. But the point, here's the point. You know he doesn't mean to kill him.
Yeah.
But what he does mean is, maybe I'm gonna knock him upside his head.
Yeah.
Right.
In boxing, if your corner man told you, your trainer told you, your promoter manager, I'll give you a bonus if you knock him out, no one would have a problem with that. That was essentially Bountygate. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Not in football.
And I was, hey, listen, man, I had plenty